Welcome back, folks. It's Chris here once again with Indaba Africa. Today is May 16th, 2020. Less than 2 days since the African National Congress reversed its bizarre stance on e-commerce trade in South Africa. Famously, on the 14th of May, the African National Congress government reversed Trade and Industry Minister Ebrahim Patel's bizarre e-commerce stance. This comes 48 days after the African National Congress restricted e-commerce because, in the words of Minister Patel, unfettered e-commerce would be unfair to traders such as spaza shops, and by extension he also means tuck shops and perhaps informal traders. Now, this will be the same African National Congress government that has done virtually nothing for the informal sector, which makes up a significant percentage of South Africa's working population. Very little has been done for the informal sector, yet the Minister of Trade and Industry felt it necessary to pose a near total moratorium on e-commerce, which beggars the imagination. If the intent is to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus, why is it that the government is stopping e-commerce? By engaging in e-commerce, consumers do not have to leave their homes, travel to a store, engage with the public, enter a store, potentially touch things that others have touched that may be infected with COVID-19, which, as we discovered, remains viable on the surfaces of metal, paper, and wood for longer periods of time than one would normally expect for a virus. They don't have to go stand in the queue, maintaining social distance or hoping to maintain social distance, wearing masks in public, walk up to the till, exchange cash to a till operator, or use a credit card that touches a machine. So we avoid all of that opportunity for the virus to spread by engaging in e-commerce. Why would the government deny this for 48 days? And what has been the harm to South Africa's economy? Well, in today's video, I'm going to discuss all of this and a little bit about the history, the recent history, and the current situation with e-commerce in South Africa. Now, before I do, I should mention that this same minister, Ebrahim Patel, is the Minister of Trade and Industry, who famously issued regulations just a few days ago restricting the sale of types of clothing that South Africans can purchase as they enter the winter season. So, for instance, he banned the sale of bikinis, but you can buy underwear. Once again, I ask the question, does that mean that you can or cannot buy bikini briefs? I think it's a fair question. My point is that these are not rational decisions, not based in science, not based in even any common sense whatsoever, but merely an arbitrary decision, ostensibly, the purpose of which is to achieve equality of outcomes. And the outcome in this case is to ensure that all South Africans are penniless and starving. Because that's all that this has accomplished, ladies and gentlemen. This restriction on e-commerce has not accomplished anything other than keeping South Africans who would work warehouses and ship goods around, and those who deliver it, delivering vital, essential goods to South Africans who remain in their homes, in their abodes, rather than violate the lockdown to go get essential goods and services. Absolutely insane, no justification for it whatsoever. And now, after 48 days of carnage in the trades, the African National Congress has lifted this arbitrary and unnecessary situation. So what sort of online retailing is there in South Africa? Well, as in the rest of the world, there are three main types of online retailers. The first of which would be the pure play or online only retailer. This would include companies like Takealot, which is South Africa's largest e-commerce site for consumers. Now, Takealot belongs to Naspers, a South African company that has a presence in the Netherlands as well, in Europe, in the EU, and also was the owner of famously Kalahari.com, a site which I previously shopped at when I lived in Southern Africa. But Kalahari.com has been absorbed and disappeared and is now part of the Takealot brand since 2014, but it all still belongs to Naspers. But that's the largest. That's a pure play. That's an internet-only site, which is similar to Amazon in many respects, in which all of its goods and services are sold over the internet online. Then you have marketplaces. In the US, for those who are familiar with this, there would be sites like Etsy or eBay, in which it's a marketplace where people can buy and sell and trade goods, and you can reach consumers that way. But there is no bricks and mortar presence. And then finally, you have the category known as omni-retailers. That would be bricks and mortar retailers, and those who also have an online presence. In South Africa, include companies like Truworths, Pick and Pay, and others, Edgar's, which was part of Edcon, which is currently in business rescue. So you have online-only retailers, or the pure play, the marketplaces, and omni-retailers. E-commerce is small in South Africa, but is the fastest growing segment of the economy. for consumers, and certainly the fastest growing section of retail. The brick and mortar retailers have not been growing for some time and have actually been losing some space in the marketplace. And as I said, e-commerce remains a small part of South Africa's economy. In 2017, it was estimated that it was only 1 to 2% of the total $1 trillion in annual retail sales. However, with an annual growth rate between 2007 and 2013 of at least 21% each and every year, that has grown significantly. So today it's estimated that in 2019, online e-commerce sales in South Africa were $3.27 billion or 49 billion rand. This year, before COVID-19, those sales were projected to grow to $3.6 billion a year. So we're talking about 400 million additional sales this year that are gone, most likely, and that growth is not going to take place. Perhaps some will by the time the end. Now with the e-commerce ban lifted, we should see rapid growth in the e-commerce sector, but this will come at the expense of informal traders and the informal sector, as well as traditional brick and mortars retailers, because people are not allowed to go to the stores during the lockdown to buy a number of items. So historically, the problem with e-commerce in South Africa has been twofold, as it has been across Africa. The first of which is the question of reliability of delivery and accountability for delivery. So for instance, the high cost and the reliability are what come into play here. Famously in 2008, Amazon, which ships, it's the number 2 site that ships to South Africa, ships consumer goods there. But Amazon, even though it doesn't have a South African presence, there's no Amazon.za. There is an Amazon Germany, one in Canada, one in France, one in the UK, one in the US, of course, but there is not a presence in South Africa. Nonetheless, it is a popular seller for goods to South Africa and remains a top site for consumers there. But famously in 2008, Amazon blacklisted the South African Post Office because of the high incidence of theft of its packages, which was costing retail a great deal and angering consumers. So theft and the long time it takes to deliver things. Famously, this is not news to any South Africans. You know that your postal service is highly unreliable, your government postal service, and you also know that it takes a long amount of time to get goods, inordinately, up to 2 months to deliver packages through e-commerce, and I'm talking about things that go through the postal service that are shipped from South Africa. So a lot of retailers will rely on other services like UPS, DHL, services like that. So unreliability of postal services is a key critical limiting factor of e-commerce. And the other one, of course, has been historically the high cost of data and the poor quality of data for internet shoppers in South Africa and across Africa. Well, the good news is that with the availability of commercial delivery from other services beyond the postal service, many online retailers can overcome the shortcomings of the South African Post Office. And when it comes to internet, the addition of the West African cable and a few other links that have come into South Africa in the past few years have greatly increased the amount of data available. Plus, the network has improved dramatically inside the country, not simply the cable network, terrestrial, but also the mobile telephony market has increased its capacity, all of which has made it far easier for South Africans to use the internet. So it's estimated that 2019, there were 16.4 million e-commerce consumers in South Africa. This is out of a population of 57 million. Of course, not all of them are adults. So 16.4 million probably equates to about 35 to 40% of adults, maybe a little bit more, depending how you look at this. So that is the market. The size of it in 2019, $3.27 billion, not insignificant. This year was originally projected to be $3.6 billion. However, we have no idea where that's going to go at this point after 48 days. The issue now is, are even some of these pure play retailers like Take-A-Lot even able to continue business? They have been able to sell some goods and services online that were available in brick and mortar stores that weren't restricted by the government. Now it's unfettered. Online retailers can sell all goods and services to all consumers in South Africa, with the exception of alcohol and cigarettes. So Mr. Patel, the Minister of Trade or Untrade, sorry, I had to edit myself there. Mr. Patel famously said this after the ban was lifted. This is his comment. He said e-commerce was critical to opening the economy through contactless transactions. Specifically, what I was talking about is what I talked about a few minutes ago, not actually using a card or paying cash at a till, but using contactless. So if you do it over a mobile payment system, if you use Zapper, or if you use a credit card, something like that, then you don't have to touch anybody. You can do this all online. and that reduces the chance to transmit the virus, as well as many other afflictions. But Patel said this can reduce the movement of consumers, yes, and the density of shoppers in retail spaces. Further, it can accelerate innovation, support local manufacturing, and increase access by the informal market and poorer South Africans. Well, yeah, true. So why did it take you 48 days to come to this conclusion? Why is it only after the Democratic Alliance filed a court case against the government of South Africa for its restrictions on e-commerce, and Dear SA brought this to South Africans' attentions and also pursued action against the government, as well as purportedly yet another case that was supposed to be coming from the Freedom Front Plus against the government of South Africa for its ban on e-commerce? Only then does Minister Patel wake up and see the light of day and suddenly has an epiphany in which he says everything that virtually anyone with a conscience and a pulse was well aware of before he made the statement, that by using e-commerce, you reduce the movement of consumers. Yes, and therefore limit the spread of the virus. You also reduce the density of shoppers who are in retail spaces, because some shoppers will now buy the things online rather than risk leaving their homes if they have concerns about the virus. Or they'll get more things online and only shop for the absolute necessities that they can only get in a physical presence. It can also accelerate innovation. Well, exactly right. South Africa lags the world when it comes to e-commerce. Most of the developed world, e-commerce represents 20% or more of retail sales. But in South Africa, as I mentioned, in 2017, it was still just 1 to 2% of retail sales. Now, it's grown a bit since then, but it is still a relatively small segment of the retail sector in South Africa. So yes, it can spur innovation. So why did you stop it from happening, Minister Patel, President Cyril Ramaphosa? Why did South Africa stop this? The only explanation given is that it's unfair. So the African National Congress is not concerned about economic growth. They're not concerned about the health and welfare of the employees who work for retailers who have online presence. They're not concerned about consumers in South Africa who need goods and services that are available online. They seem to be only concerned with the equality of outcomes as determined by the National Coronavirus Command Council. Hardly a democratic institution, and at this point, questionable whether it's even a legal body. This is also being taken to court by the Democratic Alliance, among others. So, with the restrictions now lifted on e-commerce in South Africa, there are a few things to take place here. The government says to limit the social and economic hardship caused by the pandemic on local industries and enable consumer choice. That's an ironic statement there. To enable consumer choice, they're going to restrict, pay attention, in order to limit the economic hardship caused by the pandemic on local industries and enable consumer choice to support local producers. Retailers must give prominence to the goods that are manufactured in South Africa, and to provide for as many payment options as possible for consumers that are based on reducing risk of transmission and enable poor consumers to access delivery services. Well, most poor consumers will access through mobile telephony, through their cell phones, their smartphones, and they will do so through payment platforms such as Zapper or PayPal, things like that. Yes, those are options normally available for most online retailers in South Africa. But the government is telling retailers that they must push South African goods. While that's a sound practice to encourage the consumption of South African goods, directing the retailers to do it is yet again overreach by the government. Overreach. Unless you pass a law that forces that, which would be a stupid law, by the way, in the age of globalization, unless you pass a law that's inappropriate to tell people they have to do it. You can encourage it. That's certainly the role of government. So beyond that, the Democratic Alliance's member of parliament and Trade and Industry, who's representative for Trade and Industry for the DA, their spokesman is Dean McPherson. Dean McPherson said the following: "The minister should not be applauded for doing what was clearly the right and logical thing from the beginning." Well, I would agree with him wholeheartedly. So why the ban? And what harm has been done to South Africans and South Africa's economy? Again, we are left puzzled. Why suddenly, 48 days into this, and only after being threatened with court action, that the ruling government of the day, the African National Congress, has suddenly reversed its position on the ban on e-commerce and now lifted it so that all goods and services, with the exception of cigarettes and alcohol, can be purchased online. It's a no-brainer, ladies and gentlemen. It's the easiest no-brainer in the history of mankind. There's no challenge to this thinking. It doesn't take a person with an economics degree from Harvard or Princeton or the London School of Economics to figure out that e-commerce is an effective way to limit the spread of the virus because people don't come in contact. Yes, postal carriers do touch packages, warehouse people do touch packages, but human beings must have goods and services to survive. It's as simple as that. And the better way to deliver it is through e-commerce. Now, I'm not trying to diss or suggest that we shouldn't shop at brick and mortar stores or use the omni retailers who have a brick and mortar and an online presence. What I'm suggesting is that what the government of South Africa has done has so severely damaged the economy and left people hungry in cities and towns around South Africa. And for what? To achieve a social objective, a questionable social objective at best. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I suggest to you that this is malgovernance or it's simply incompetence. I'm not convinced it's incompetence because the government of South Africa in the past, under the African National Congress, has proven that it can govern effectively, particularly in the sphere of economics. The government of the African National Congress for 10 years after the end of apartheid showed great restraint and good judgment in its management of the economy and its macroeconomic policies by and large. Yet for the past 15 years, it has gone in a very bad direction, and one is left wondering, what is the desire here? Is the ultimate outcome here, the goal of the cadres, the leadership of the African National Congress, simply to impoverish all South Africans? Whites, blacks, Asians, coloreds, everyone. Is that your goal? Because your policies are doing that. And this is the most obvious and patently clear example of a misguided policy by the ANC. And this Minister Patel prescribing what clothing people can buy, what exactly is the purpose of that? Who cares if somebody buys a bikini and they want to wear it in the wintertime? That's their business. How does that stop the spread of COVID-19? Are you concerned that thousands of South Africans will rock up on the beach in Durban in freezing cold winter weather to take a dip in their bikinis? You need to grasp reality, people that make these decisions. These are poor macroeconomic decisions, and it is taking place in a vacuum of leadership as we sit back and watch the ANC appear to stumble through this COVID-19 Wuhan coronavirus crisis and pandemic as if they just walked into government for the first time ever after graduating from middle school last week. Is that harsh? Well, ladies and gentlemen, look at the results. Look at the outcome. I have been among the more generous commenters on the African National Congress in the past, and up until 2 years ago, was still giving the African National Congress the benefit of the doubt. But this is just poor judgment. This minister has no business being the minister. Find someone competent, President Ramaphosa, and get your National Coronavirus Command Council start making rational decisions, not decisions based on, I have no idea what they're based on. They're not based on rationality and science. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about all I can say about this issue for now, other than say that it's been incredibly frustrating to watch South Africans suffer from the ban on e-commerce and the lockdown restrictions that still exist in South Africa, which are limiting trade, commerce, and crushing employment and the hopes of millions of South Africans, and rising social ills from crimes that happen behind closed doors not being reported, such as gender-based violence, incest, spousal abuse, social isolation, not a crime, but a severe concern. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a production of the Indaba Africa Group. This is Chris once again. If you enjoy this content or you found this video thought-provoking or interesting, I ask that you smash that subscribe button right down there and subscribe to my channel. Be sure to toggle the little notifications bell there so that you get notifications whenever I have a live stream or a prepared video like this. And remember that once a week at 11 o'clock on Saturdays, I host a live stream with a guest normally. This week, we're hoping to have a shepherd from the Netherlands talk about urban sheep herding in the Netherlands. An interesting topic, I must say. That is Saturday, 11 o'clock in the East Coast of the United States. That will be 5 p.m. in South Africa, 4 p.m. in Abuja, Nigeria. So, if you have comments, feel free to leave your comments. I read all comments. If I can answer them, I'll answer them to the best of my ability. And also, positive, negative, I'll respond. If you're abusive, I'll ignore it. And finally, please smash that like button on the other side there. Viewership is driven by the percentage of likes based on the number of views. And so the more likes we get on a video, the more likely it is this will appear on people's channel feed. So I thank you once again. And that's about all I've got to say on this topic of e-commerce returning to South Africa and the decisions that led to it and the state of e-commerce in South Africa. Folks in South Africa, I wish you a pleasant day. Those around the world, please pay attention to the events in South Africa as they are truly historic and strange as they unfold in the midst of the Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19. We'll see you here next time on Indaba Africa.